Yes, welcome in. Badgers getting the day off from practice down in Platteville. We'll be back out there tomorrow. Pads coming on here soon, Jesse?
I hope so. Real
Yeah,
football. It's been
need a
real,
little
but it gets
football.
even realer.
Yeah, we got a little bit of real football on Thursday as they put the shoulder pads on for the first time. We got some one-on-ones with the offensive and defensive lines. Got some hitting, a little bit of hitting. I mean, again, it's been as not violent. It's been as aggressive of a first 3 days as I can remember, which is good. It's what they needed. But they're getting the day off of a practice. What are you doing for your day off?
I'm still working, Zach. There's no rest for the weary.
No rest when Badger Connect needs some stories. But they'll be back in the field tomorrow. What we're going to do here today is go through some of what we've seen from the first 3 days. I think reset maybe some of the position battles that we were thinking about going into camp. But again, it's just 3 days. I get that. But maybe just a little bit of a refresher of where things stand with that. We've also got a little bit of Nyzier Fourqurean situation or update there. I'm going to try not to mangle that too bad here in a little bit. Certainly, law is not something that I have a degree in. And I don't think you do either, right?
I do not. That is correct.
Okay. All right. So no law degrees between the two of us, but we'll talk about that. And Nyzier Fourqurean has been practicing, got some reps with the twos yesterday and twos, threes, a little mix of the both. So we'll see, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I figure we'll start with what you wrote about for after the practice on Thursday and also into for obviously for Friday morning. And that is what you've seen through the first 3 days. We are 3 days in. And I think it's impossible not to start with the guy that we kind of talked about the other day. And his name is Mason Ryer. And he had another huge day at practice on Thursday. And he continues to be, I want to say talk of the camp, but considering Corey Walker has not been able to practice, he has gotten a ton of opportunities with that first team line, and he's taken advantage of them. He has been everywhere.
He has. And I want to start up front, and I mentioned this in the recap. We have seen outside linebackers thrive in practice before in the not too distant past, and it hasn't materialized during the season. But that doesn't mean there shouldn't be some cause for optimism based on what Ryer has done in his past and what he's doing early this fall. I think he's been outstanding. If I had to say one guy on defense who has stood out most to me, I would say it's Mason Ryer. And some of that has to do with not knowing the expectations going in because he was recovering from a 6th knee surgery during spring practices. So we didn't see him at all. And I talked to him a couple weeks ago. And of course, he was very confident in himself and said that fans should expect a show, as he put it. But you can see what it's like when he's healthy. And I mentioned this on the last show, Zach, but I really do think there's something to be said for the energy and passion that he plays with, because you can see it on every play. It legitimately looks like he's thinking that might be his last play, and it's reflected in his performance. He's been a consistent menace. The best play that I thought he made was a play that he didn't record any stats. Billy Edwards Jr. still got the ball away, but he came off the edge and he was double teamed. There was Lance Mason and Dylan Jones blocking him, and he just kept pushing forward until he moved Jones onto his backside. There's just a level of relentlessness, and he has made a handful of plays. One on Thursday where he stuffed Jones for probably what would have been a 1-yard loss. Some other plays that would be sacks. He's got the speed and the experience, and he's been everything that Wisconsin hoped he would be. But we're 3 practices in, and with him, you got to make sure that he gets to the opener healthy.
Yeah. When we were out in Vegas, Luke Fickell said, kind of got to treat him like Aaron Wood a little bit, because you don't want to not have him when it actually matters, right? Like, he kind of need to protect him from himself a little bit. And certainly the way he plays, you got to kind of protect himself, got to protect him from himself. But of all the positions that Wisconsin needed help at, a guy who was going to make plays in the backfield was at the top of the list, at least on the defensive side of the ball, was it not?
Absolutely. When Mike Tressel was talking to reporters at Local Media Day Monday, he mentioned certainly tackles for loss. We all know Wisconsin was last in the country in that category, getting takeaways and then limiting explosives. Now, one guy can't be responsible for all 3 of those, but you need a difference maker. And Austin Brown was asked about this after practice Thursday. He was specifically asked about Mason and what he'd seen, and he was talking about his ability to make plays off the edge. He said that's really something we haven't had since Nick Herbig. Not necessarily comparing the two, because Nick was here 3 years and went straight to the NFL, and that's obviously Ryer's goal, but you need somebody that the offense has to account for on every snap. And at least early this preseason, Mason has been that guy.
Yeah. Again, early. And also, the side that he's been working on is still I think a little bit in flux for Wisconsin as well, right?
The left side, fair to say.
Yeah, the left side of Wisconsin's offensive line is still a little bit in flux. We'll talk about that because they had a little bit of a change yesterday. But, whether it's been Davis Heinsohn or J.P. Benshaw or Joe Brunner or Leighton Nelson, who got some work there yesterday, it's still a little unsettled on that side of the ball. And that's been the side that he's been going against. But he can only go against the guys he's going against, right? It's like we can only play the teams that are on our schedule. It's not our fault that they all suck. That's not what I meant. I'm more thinking of like Indiana last year, where they didn't really beat anybody good, but they can only play the teams on their schedule. I'm not saying I'm not saying Wisconsin's linemen suck. So whoever just took that and ran with it, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you do what you do against the guys that you're facing. And he's been impressive these first 3 days of practice. The thing is, he is not the same size as Corey Walker, right? And I wonder, and maybe you might disagree with this, I wonder if he'd be able to hold up against some of the bigger teams Wisconsin will face.
To be determined, but obviously what Wisconsin wanted was so many different body types. And I think if you've got the explosiveness and the strength, that's a start. But he has not really played a full season in what feels like forever, because he missed last year when he was at Louisville dealing with more knee issues. And even in 2023 at Louisville, he had to have the first surgery on his knee in the spring, and he said he considered himself to be maybe 80% just to get through the 2023 season. So that to me is the biggest question mark, more so than physically, does he have the size? I think he's got the tools that you need. Another thing that I want to note, just I have found interesting after practice, when we do these interviews with players and coaches, pretty much everybody leaves the field. Him and Daryl Peterson are always at the end of the field, outside the end zone, working on individual pass rush moves. I think they've formed a pretty tight bond here in a very short time frame. And obviously those two are going to be vital to what Wisconsin wants to accomplish in that room.
Yeah, I think for DP, that's always been him. He's always been one of the last guys off the field. And I know that he was obviously disappointed about how his season went last year and some of the things that he was, was being asked to do, and it was tough. But he's put on more weight, and we'll see if he can kind of get back to being the pass rusher that we saw earlier in his career. It'll be important, and also obviously Sebastian Cheeks as well. And when Corey Walker gets back, Corey Walker, they've got some, as you said, different body types at that spot where they can get after teams in maybe different ways. And I'm not even just saying those guys. Tyrese Fearbreeze is another guy too that has been able to come off the edge a little bit. Moving on, you said Mason Ryer, of all the guys on defense that have stood out and could potentially have grabbed your attention and not let go. I would also put Matthew Traynor in there, and to maybe not the same extent, but relatively close, Matt Young, both transfers and both safeties that are playing behind two older guys.
Yeah, we had a chance to talk to both of them on Thursday. It was safety day. We also spoke with safeties coach Jack Cooper. And obviously, we know you've got Austin Brown and Preston Zachman back there. Those guys played a combined 1,212 snaps last season, and Preston played more defensive snaps than anybody. You're not just going to take them off the field. So I don't know what percentage of snaps those two will ultimately get, but I do think Wisconsin has to feel pretty good about those two transfers that they brought in with Traynor and Young. Young is consistently around the ball. This is what he did when he was at Division III Bethel with the 16 interceptions and 6 pick sixes in 2 seasons there. I know that's at the D3 level, but there is a certain natural instinct that he plays with in football IQ that Cooper talked about that immediately translated in spring ball. Well, he was at it again on Thursday. So he had an interception. It was during skeleton drills, but Hunter Simmons threw a ball over the middle and Young just stepped right in front and picked it off. And then there was another play where he just had a great pass breakup. And I know this was with the reserves. I think the receiver was Davion Thomas Kumpala, but a ball that should have been caught, but Young was able to affect it enough to break it up. And Trainer, what has stood out with him, and something everyone's talked about, is the physicality that he plays with back there. He was his conference's defensive rookie of the year last season. He's been a consistent presence in all three of these practices, whether it's PBUs or just being a standout on the back end, even if he's not getting a hand on it. I think that those two guys have earned the right to play. I'll just be curious on what those rotations look like, because one of the questions Jack was asked about is like the communication level required with those two guys, and how often do you want to put someone else in there? But I do think that you are going to see both of them out there to some degree this season.
And Cooper was also asked about Austin Brown and potentially, is he a slot, right? Because that would then obviously open up a spot at safety. And while they think highly of him in the slot and would be comfortable using him there, they want to keep him at safety for now. And maybe later they'll want to move him, but right now, this is the best spot for him. And that kind of makes it a little more difficult for those other guys to get on the field.
Yeah, ultimately you want to put your best players in the positions you believe they can succeed. And so Jack was saying, like, he was our best nickel corner a year ago, and now they were able to bring in Jameer Latimer II, who's pretty much handled that role. I asked Austin about that and whether there were conversations in the offseason, and he said he expected to play at least a little bit, and he said he did toward the end of spring ball, not very much. That's where he played the most snaps a year ago, was as the nickel guy. Yeah. But he said he likes being at safety. He likes being on the back end, and he feels like he prefers to be in zone coverage, whereas when he was in the slot, he said he was man coverage like 80% of the time. I think he can handle any role, but it's nice to have a veteran like that on the back end if you believe you have someone else who can plug into the nickel role, and they clearly have that with Latimer.
Yeah, man versus zone, it's, eyes on the quarterback. I'm sure he's a guy that probably is wanting to affect the game a little bit more with turnovers, and having your eyes back to the quarterback, easier to do certainly from that spot than it is when you're playing man in the slot. So we'll see how that all plays out. But I like, both Austin Brown and Preston Zachman are seniors. So, and Young and Trainer both have multiple years. So I don't think, if we don't see them a ton this year, doesn't mean we won't see them next year. And for Trainer, 2 more years. He's got another 2 years. And then there's some younger guys at that spot as well, like Grant Dean and Matt Emmerich. They have a nice young group. And then I would even mention Raphael Dunn, who's also back there in a little bit different body type. But I like the future that they have the position. And when I say future, I understand that they could be gone tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but they could be gone by December. I certainly understand that. But I like what they've built at that spot. So that was on the defensive side of the ball, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the position battles there in a little bit. But I wanted to go back to the offensive side of the ball, and we mentioned it a little bit. There made some changes along the offensive line on Thursday. Through the first 2 days, it was pretty much the same, essentially. Davis Heinzen, Joe Brunner, Jake Renfro, Emerson Mendel / Kerry Kadenko, and then Riley Mallman. And yesterday, it was Joe Brunner at left tackle, Davis Heinzen at left guard, and then the same 3 the rest of the way. And there were some moves behind him too. But what do you think it says that they did make that move?
I'm really intrigued.
With Heinzen and Brunner.
I'm really intrigued by it. We know that Brunner is versatile, and they were having conversations in the offseason about whether he might kick out to left tackle. He did a little bit late in spring after Kevin Haywood suffered the injury and Leighton Nelson was coming back from his own injury. I think this makes a lot of sense, but we'll have to see how well they perform as spring ball progresses. And I also don't know if when we get to practice 4, it's going to look completely different. Very clearly, AJ Blazik is working a lot of rotations, but Brunner's got that versatility. And Davis Heinsohn, maybe this guard would be a better spot for him at the Big Ten level. He has, like I've said before, the 36 consecutive starts at Central Michigan was a school record there. 30 of those starts were at left tackle, but the first 6 games of last season, he started at left guard. So it's not like you're asking him to come in and do something he's never done before. Again, we need to see more and need to see whether Blazek believes that is the combination he wants long-term. But I'm very intrigued by that. And you mentioned Emerson Mandel. He was with the ones to open practice the first 2 days. They moved some things around in the middle of practice too. And then when we got to Thursday, it was Kerry Kadenko in that spot. Mandel was working with the 2s. And the other thing they did with the second team group was they flipped the tackles. So JP Benchwall had been at right tackle. They moved him to left. No, he'd been at right tackle. They moved, well, which one? I'm off.
JP had been at left tackle.
Left tackle. They moved him to right tackle. They moved Leighton Nelson from right tackle to left tackle. So Blazek obviously still working a lot of different combinations. But with that first group, definitely intrigued by what they tried to do on Thursday.
Yep. The only other thing I'll note along the offensive line, and it's something that I'm sure will improve as the fall goes along. Some of the snaps with the second team have been a little bit inconsistent, I think would be the word from Ryan Corey. Not always exactly where it needs to be. So that is something I'm sure that they're going to be focusing on. If they didn't feel totally comfortable putting him out there, you could always throw Kerry Kadenko at center. It's a spot that he was at a majority of his career before this past spring. So we'll see. I think Ryan Corey's got a bright future. I'm just saying the snaps have been an issue a little bit, probably more so than they want. The other spot on the offensive side of the ball is at quarterback, and we've talked about Billy Edwards on day 1. We talked about Danny O'Neal on day 2. On day 3, Hunter Simmons showed what he could do a little bit.
Yeah, this competition for the backup job, I think will continue. Danny had a very solid day on Wednesday, and Hunter Simmons, I think he put together 2 of the better throws. It's not like these quarterbacks are just launching it downfield consistently, but when they got to 11 on 11, he had a ball. Maybe it was slightly behind Eugene Hilton Jr., and it wasn't the one that Wisconsin put out on its social media, but you throw the ball in Hilton's general direction, he's probably going to come down with it. But Hilton was able to catch it between a couple defenders for 20 plus yards. And then on the next play, Simmons delivered a ball to, I think it was Vinny Anthony against a zone, just put it in a great spot. Vinny found the opening in the zone, but Simmons put it right on him, 25 plus yard gain along the left sideline. So I think he's very clearly in the mix for the backup job. I don't know ultimately what that's going to look like. Danny O'Neal probably has he has a higher ceiling. He's started last year as a true freshman. He's versatile because he can impact the game in an RPO. He can get out when the pocket breaks down. But in terms of consistency, I like what I've seen from Simmons early here.
Before we move on to the position battles, what have you thought about Carter Smith so far?
I've not seen as much of him, obviously, as we saw in spring ball, because they've added Simmons and they're looking at him in that competition for the backup job. Just need more consistency. But again, I don't know that I've seen a ton of the 11 on 11 work. A lot of the snaps it feels like he's getting are when they have the young guys on one half of the field and then the older guys on the other half. So room to grow, but that is expected out of a freshman.
Absolutely. All right, let's jump into. I think we've hit on a couple of these as we've talked about the positions, but in terms of position battles going into fall camp, there were several that we're going to be keeping an eye on. One that we have not talked about today, at least, is at cornerback, because obviously with Nyzier Fourqurean not there, there's an opening in the starting lineup. I shouldn't say Nyzier Fourqurean not there. He is there, but he's not with the starters at this moment. Again, we'll get to that in a second. But Emilio Agard and Deone Hill have taken a majority of the first team reps opposite of Ricardo Hallman. What do we know there so far? It would appear that Emilio Agard has gotten more reps with the first team than Deone Hill, but you keep much closer track of that than me.
I haven't tracked the snap counts between the two of them, but I don't know that we've seen either one of them make a bunch of plays. Like when we're talking about the safeties, they're regularly affecting the game, but that doesn't mean those corners aren't doing their job. Agard, it made a lot of sense because he was lining up in that role with the twos and Deone Hill was on the other side. But to me, this remains an ongoing battle. But those are clearly the two guys that are vying for it. I don't see anybody else. I know there was some discussion before camp started about, well, could you slide Jameer Latimer outside? That doesn't seem to be the case. They feel like they're pretty locked in with him in the slot. And so it's going to continue to be Agard and Hill. And it's tough for me to say who's got the upper hand. All we can really go on is who's getting the majority of the snaps.
Yep. Still early. Agard did have one nice play yesterday that stood out, closing on a receiver pretty quick and breaking up a pass. But you're right. We haven't seen a ton. I think Daniel actually had one of those too. That might have been on Wednesday, but they have not. I don't know if they've gotten a ton of balls coming their way to make plays. So it's also still very early. I don't know if they've thrown the ball down the field nearly as much as I would anticipate them doing in the season. And I would anticipate that moving as we get further into camp. We'll see a little bit more of that. We talked about this a little bit ago, but Kerry Kadenko and Emerson Mandel, it feels like Kadenko has a little bit of an upper hand there.
For now, yeah. I mean, again, they did go with Mandel to start the first two practices, but as things have moved along, Kadenko is elevated into that top role. As I've said before, I'm not going to pretend to understand all the intricacies of line play, but Kadenko is a veteran, and there's something to be said for that experience if you're shaky on a young guy and think he needs more time to develop.
Put you on the spot right now. Davis Heinzen or Joe Brunner are going to be the starting left tackle when they take the field against Miami of Ohio.
Wow. I think I'll go Joe Brunner. I think they slide Davis Heinzen inside. But everything could change in the next practice.
Right? Yeah, that's the beauty of this. If you want something different to happen, just wait 24 hours because it certainly could. The running back spot where Dylan Jones, Darian Dupree, and Cade Yakimelli, we went into camp not knowing exactly what it was going to look like. I don't know that I've seen anything in these first 3 days to suggest that the starter is going to be anybody but Dylan Jones.
I mean, it certainly looks like.
It's 3 days, but it feels like he has certainly not claimed it. He has put his claim on it, and now he's got to obviously continue practice here. But I like the other two. It's just Dylan Jones has routinely and consistently been the number one guy.
Right. It feels like it's heading in that direction. He's gotten more of those opportunities with the ones, and he runs with such power and speed. He's got that great combination of some of your classic Wisconsin running backs, and I don't want to put any ceiling on him or expectation on him relative to those other guys because he's barely played in his college career. But yeah, I mean, based on what we've seen, he's gotten a lot of those one reps. But when then Darian gets in and he does his thing too, I think it's a great combination. I continue to not really know what Cade Yakimelli's role is going to be. But that's what we've seen so far.
How many yards per carry do you think Yakimelli is going to average this year? Is going to be a more or less than 8.3?
Let's say 5.4.
Will that get him on the field, or will that keep him off the field? 8.3 was not good enough to get him on the field. So,
yeah, I just don't know.
Nope.
It's very difficult to project given the two young guys that they have and the reps that they're getting.
Yeah. Backup QB job that we just talked about. Another put you on the spot. I shouldn't say this because of what has happened the last couple of years, but say Billy Edwards misses some time. Who would be the first guy in at this point? You're going to go Danny O'Neal, right?
Yeah, I was going to say Danny. Again, he started all last year at San Diego State. He's got a higher upside, but they continue to push each other, and they're getting their fair share of 2 reps. So it's clearly an ongoing evaluation.
Wide receiver after the top 3, because we believe Jaden Ballard and Vinny Anthony and Tretch Kahuna are your top 3. Who are the next 3 for you?
Chris Brooks Jr., Tyrell Henry. Did I say Eugene Hilton Jr.? I mean,
we're on the same page.
Yeah. Now again, are they going to play 6 wide receivers? Highly unlikely, but you never know. I've been a fan of Hilton since he got here. He keeps making plays. I don't know how you can keep a guy like that off the field, but Brooks brings his own skill set. A very physical dude. He can help set the edge when they do need to block with the wide receivers near the line of scrimmage. And I think that's going to be the case fairly often this season, especially in comparison to perhaps what we saw with Phil Longo. And Tyrell Henry continues to make plays too. They've got a lot of quality options.
They do. Do we consider Joe Griffin a part of this at all?
I don't know. I'm not going to say he's not a part of it. I mean, he made a couple plays. It's just what would he have to do to leapfrog some of those guys who have more consistently worked with the second group? I don't know.
Yeah. I guess we'll find out. The other spot that we talked about coming into camp was kicker, and we got to see a little bit of the kicking competition yesterday, and they both were fine. They all, I believe the longest kick came from 42, and they didn't miss anything from inside of 40. My guess is you're still a Vacos guy.
At this point, I think he's going to have to do something either to lose the job, or Lom is just going to have to bury every kick that he takes. Ultimately, I think it'll be Lom handling the kickoffs and Vacos handling the field goals. But I think there's a shorter leash for that on field goals this season.
I think there's absolutely a shorter leash. And I know a lot of people were a little upset that there even is a competition, because what was his percentage last year? 63? He's like, he was fine. I think he was fine as a sophomore, right? Like he obviously was great at Ohio at Ohio as a freshman, but 63 is not going to get it done. And a lot of those were inside of 40. I understand why there's a competition, right?
Yeah.
It makes plenty of sense. Anything else, any other competitions that I have not talked about that you think we should be mentioning?
I don't know. Defensive line, I don't know if it's competition, but I think there's a lot of people they continue to rotate up front on the interior.
How many guys play?
Luke said he wants 6. He's been saying that for 3 full seasons. Well, Charles Perkins, Javier Suggs, Ben Barton, those are 3. Parker Peterson clearly is going to play. He got, I felt like more reps to me with the top group. He's more of a run stuffing type of player. And then is Dylan Johnson going to be part of that mix? Is Brandon Lane going to be part of that mix? Felt like Lane got more reps with the top group. So all of them could play. I don't know that I can say any of them have popped out like, oh, they're just getting into the backfield and making plays. So it's just really hard for me to evaluate.
Yeah. Once the pads fully come on, I think we'll get a little bit better idea of that. But there have been splash plays, I think, from a number of guys. It's been more the edge guys that have made those plays than maybe the inside guys. And that is always, quite honestly, that's always been the case at Wisconsin. Now it's a different defense that they're running and different looks than they ran in the past, but it was always about the edge guys and the inside linebackers. And I thought the inside linebackers were all over the place again yesterday. They have been locked in and putting guys on the ground, even when maybe they shouldn't always be putting them on the ground. So those they have been everything that I think we expected going into camp at this point. I know we didn't talk about them yet, but certainly Allegro and Curtis and Posa and Cooper Catalano has been fantastic. I would say these first few practices, they've got so many guys there that I would feel comfortable playing. And I didn't even mention Turner. How do you say his name? Anturner Turner?
Antaron Turner.
I just say it quickly, so you can't really tell. So all 5 of those guys, I think, are ones that potentially play if they needed them to at this point. I know Mason Post is still very early here, but certainly feels like it a little bit.
I think Curtis and Allegro have been outstanding in the mold of some of those dynamic inside linebacker duos we've seen at Wisconsin. You're right, Zach. Hard hitting all over the place. Feels like if there's a play to be made at the second level, they're getting involved and wreaking some havoc, which is exactly what you want to see.
Absolutely. All right, let's jump into this Nyzier Fourqurean thing real quickly. Obviously, he is still waiting to hear back from the NCAA on his appeal. We both think that is very unlikely to go his way. But in the meantime, he's filed an amended suit against the NCAA in court. And he, it's a little bit more broad. And I'm not going to, it's not just specifically zoned in on his case anymore. There's more to it. But I think the most notable thing out of this entire thing is the dates of when everything could happen. Usually, as we know, I should say most people know, the court process is very slow. It moves glacially. This lawsuit is set to go to trial in less than 2 months. It is slated for, I believe, September 29th was the date. And so it's possible, if he were to win, and he's asking for a permanent injunction, among other things, permanent injunction that would allow him to play the entire season, even if the NCAA were to appeal and win that appeal, and also asking Wisconsin not to get penalized for any potential wins if he does play and it would get overturned later on, like the injunction would get overturned later on. There's a lot in there. Do we see Nyzier Fourqurean this year? Because the earliest at this point right now we could see him be, I think, the October 4th game against Michigan on the road, if that were to go his way.
I'm going to say no. I think the odds feel like they're stacked against him. Like you said, though, Zach, it is notable that it was expedited, whatever that means in the court system, 2 months. But you're talking about a situation where you're already nearly halfway through the season and you need that decision to go your way. And if it doesn't or anything drags on, that's it. So you've already had it overturned once. I don't know if putting these broader implications in play is going to help his case. It's just hard for me to see at this point it going his way, but I'm not a lawyer.
That's right.
For Fourqurean's sake, I hope it works out. I will just say this, it would be absolutely absurd if he was able to play and then at a later date something happened where Wisconsin had to forfeit victories. Just like, that's absurd to me. So I'm glad that's at least part of the equation here.
Well, I mean, if you listen to Joe Klatt, they won't have any victories to forfeit after the month of September anyway. So it doesn't really matter, according to Joe Klatt. It's a case, and I'm not, as I said, we're not going to pretend that we are lawyers and looking to go over it. The only thing I will note is that the judge in the case is the same one that initially put the injunction in place, William Connolly. It's going to be the same judge. So for that case, and I believe he said when he issued the injunction that it was a case that Fourqurean would be likely to win, but he has now also widened the width of the case and like what they're looking at. It's widened the scope, I should say, of the case, and there are more things at hand than just what was initially included in there. But we'll see. It would be quite the midseason edition, and again, they have to treat it like he's an injured player now, right? You have to treat it as if he is not going to be there for the first 4 weeks at least, and that is what they're doing. But he did get some team reps yesterday, and at least on some level, they're keeping him involved.
You got to keep him sharp to some degree, and if it's not going to be with the ones because you don't want to take away the opportunities that the guys are going to have in week one, it's not the worst thing in the world to give him a handful of reps. He's still part of the team. You're still allowed to do that, and so why not work him at least minimally? Because you just don't know what's going to happen when you get to October.
Yeah, would be huge though. Would be huge. If they were to get him back for the most difficult stretch on their schedule, that month of October. So we'll see. Wisconsin back on the field on Saturday for practice number 4. We'll be up there, and we'll have more stuff to talk about after that. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from Badger Connect. You've been listening to The Camp.